The cold December wind sliced through the streets of Manhattan as Keanu Reeves stepped out of the black SUV in front of the New York police station. The sky was a heavy gray blanket threatening snow, and the flashing red and blue lights from the patrol cars painted the wet pavement in broken colors. A thin mist rose from the ground as he exhaled, adding to the strange, uneasy feeling tightening in his chest. He had no idea why he was summoned. The call had come early that morning, just as he was preparing for a quiet day at home. A firm voice on the phone said, "Mr. Reeves, NYPD needs you to come in immediately to give a statement regarding an ongoing case. No explanation, no context, just a command." Keanu wasn't the type to ignore such a request. Even with his status, he respected the law, and he respected people. So he agreed, though something about the tone of the caller lingered in his mind like a warning bell. As he approached the tall glass doors of the police station, he noticed the atmosphere inside looked unusually tense. Officers moved briskly through the lobby, radios crackling, paperwork shuffling, and the scent of old coffee drifting in the air. Keanu paused for a moment at the entrance, taking a slow breath. He had walked into many intense situations on movie sets, but this felt different. This was real. He stepped inside, the heavy doors shutting behind him with a dull thud. Instantly, the energy shifted. Some officers recognized him, their eyes widening with surprise. Others whispered behind stacks of folders. But Keanu kept his head lowered, hands in the pockets of his long black coat, avoiding any unnecessary attention. A faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mixing with the metallic tapping of keyboards. Keanu could sense the weight of eyes on him, but he remained calm, collected, a quiet presence in a loud place. He walked toward the front desk where a few officers were sorting out reports. But before he could speak, his gaze drifted to the small digital clock mounted on the wall. 9:14 a.m. Still far too early for anyone to be this stressed. Something was off. Keanu's calm expression slowly shifted into mild concern. What exactly am I walking into? His mind scanned through every possibility. A misunderstanding? Identity confusion? A witness statement? But none of it fit. No one from NYPD had contacted him for months, and he had no involvement in anything remotely suspicious. Still, he moved forward with steady steps. The police station felt colder than the outside air, almost as if the building itself was holding its breath. As he reached the reception area, he placed a gentle hand on the counter. "Good morning," he said softly, voice warm and respectful. "I was asked to come in. I believe someone needs my statement." The officer behind the desk didn't even look up, and at that moment, the real confrontation was about to begin. The woman behind the reception desk finally lifted her eyes. Slow, deliberate, and filled with an icy edge. She was a tall black lady officer with sharp cheekbones, perfectly braided hair pulled tight behind her head, and a stare so piercing it could cut steel. Her badge glinted under the fluorescent lights as she narrowed her gaze at Keanu. For a moment, she said nothing, just studied him, measured him, judged him. Keanu stood politely, hands still in the pockets of his long coat, offering a small, respectful smile. But she didn't return it. Instead, her lips curled into something between amusement and irritation. "Oh, it's you," she said, dragging out the last word like it had a bad taste. Keanu blinked slowly, keeping his composure. "Yes, ma'am? I received a call." She raised her hand sharply to silence him. "Don't ma'am me," she snapped. "And don't act like you're here to do us a favor. You're not special in this building." Her voice carried across the lobby, making a few nearby officers turn their heads. But she didn't care. She seemed almost eager to embarrass him. Keanu took a quiet breath, steady and controlled. "I apologize if I seemed that way. I was simply asked to—" Again, she cut him off. Yes, you were asked." She made exaggerated air quotes. "You people always want attention. Think the whole world revolves around you." Keanu didn't respond. His face remained calm, though inside he felt the sting of unfair hostility. Still, he refused to escalate. The officer leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen loudly on the desk, intentionally drawing more eyes to the situation. "You're here for questioning. That means you wait until I decide to call you in." Keanu nodded gently. "Of course." But his politeness only seemed to make her more irritated. She smirked, tilting her head. You know, the moment you walked in, I wondered why everyone acts like you're some kind of hero. She leaned closer, her voice dropping into a mocking whisper. From where I'm sitting, you look like just another man who thinks he's important. Keanu felt the words hit like a slap, yet he didn't flinch. His eyes softened with patience instead of anger. As she studied his reaction, her smirk deepened, as though she enjoyed testing him. You can sit over there, she said finally, pointing to a row of metal chairs against the wall. And don't wander. You're not here as a guest. You're here under investigation. Keanu nodded once. Thank you. He walked to the assigned seat, the eyes of officers following him. The hostility, the coldness, the intentional disrespect, everything felt strangely targeted. Why? What did she have against him? What had he walked into? Keanu sat down quietly, unaware that the tension was only beginning, and this officer had much more venom waiting. 20 silent minutes passed. The police station hummed with activity, phones ringing, printers clattering, officers exchanging quick conversations as they hurried between desks. Yet in that buzzing environment, Keanu felt strangely isolated. Every now and then, a curious glance flicked in his direction, but no one approached him. The black lady officer eventually stood from her desk with an irritated sigh, grabbed a thick folder and marched across the lobby. Her boots clicked sharply against the floor, each step firm and deliberate. She stopped right in front of Keanu, her shadow falling over him. Get up, she ordered. Keanu rose calmly. She didn't wait. She turned sharply and walked toward a long hallway, expecting him to follow. He did, silent, respectful, and alert. The hallway was narrow and dim, lined with faded posters about procedure and safety. At the end was a heavy gray door with a small glass window. The officer pushed it open forcefully, causing it to slam against the wall with a bang. Inside was the interrogation room. A metal table sat at the center with two mismatched chairs on either side. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead. A wall-mounted camera blinked in the corner, its small red light glowing. Sit, she said coldly. Keanu sat. She tossed the thick folder onto the table so aggressively that it slid halfway, across and nearly fell. Loose papers fluttered, scattering across the metal surface. Keanu didn't react. He waited patiently. The officer leaned her hands on the table and stared directly into his eyes. Her expression was sharper, colder, more hostile than before, like she had been waiting for this moment. You know what your problem is? She said, voice low but razor-edged. Keanu kept his voice soft. I'm not sure, ma'am. But if I did something wrong... Oh, stop pretending to be humble. Her laugh was short and bitter. You celebrities are all the same. You walk in here thinking your name gives you power. Keanu shook his head gently. I don't think that at all. I'm here to cooperate. Cooperate? She scoffed. She leaned closer until her face was just inches away from his. You're here because we called you. That means you follow our rules. You don't talk unless I tell you. You don't breathe unless I let you. Keanu stayed silent, his calm demeanor only making her angrier. She opened the folder with a dramatic flick, scattering more papers. She didn't care. She wanted chaos. She wanted him uncomfortable. You see this? She said, tapping the top page. This is a list of accusations. And guess what? I think you're capable of all of them. Keanu's brows furrowed slightly. He wasn't offended, just confused. Accusations? He asked gently. About what? Her eyes narrowed. You'll find out when I decide you deserve to know, she began pacing slowly around him. Like a predator circling its prey, you're not the nice guy the world thinks you are, she continued, each word dripping with resentment. The air in the interrogation room grew heavier as the officer continued pacing, her boots echoing against the metal floor. The overhead fluorescent bulb flickered slightly, casting sharp shadows across the walls. It looked less like a police interview and more like a psychological trap, a deliberate attempt to break him. Keanu sat perfectly still. His posture was relaxed, shoulders loose, hands resting on the cold metal table. He didn't fidget, didn't shift, didn't let frustration leak into his eyes. His composure was almost unnerving because it was the exact opposite of what the officer wanted. He could feel her anger intensify each time she looked back at him. Finally, she stopped pacing and slammed both palms down on the table. The metal rattled under the force. "Are you even listening to me?" she demanded. Keanu looked up slowly, his expression gentle. "Yes," he said calmly. "I'm listening to everything you say." "Then why don't you react?" she barked. Most people get scared when they sit in this room. They stutter. They panic. "You just sit there like you're above this." Keanu breathed in slowly. "Because getting angry won't help. I'm here to understand what's happening." His voice was steady, almost too steady for the situation. The officer clenched her jaw, her nostrils flaring with frustration. She circled behind him again, her silhouette passing momentarily, through the spotlight like a shadow in a movie scene. "You think staying calm makes you smart?" she taunted. "You think it makes you innocent? I'll tell you something." She leaned down near his ear. "It makes you look guilty." Keanu didn't even turn his head. He simply lowered his eyes to the table. "I'm sorry if I'm not responding the way you expect. But I respect this process. I'm trying to cooperate." His soft tone only fueled her rage. She stepped around and planted herself in front of him again. "Respect," she repeated mockingly. "If you respected this room, you'd show fear. You'd show humility. You wouldn't look at me with that calm face, like you're waiting for me to finish." Keanu finally met her eyes. Not aggressively, not defensively, just openly. "I'm not trying to challenge you," he said. "I'm trying to show you I'm here in good faith." For a brief moment, a tiny flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, as if his sincerity pricked through her armor. But pride snapped it away instantly. She straightened her shoulders and scoffed. "You know what you remind me of?" she said, pacing again. "Someone who's been pampered so long he forgot what real authority looks like." Keanu stayed silent, choosing dignity over confrontation. "Say something," she snapped suddenly. "Anything. Defend yourself." He looked at her gently and replied with the simplest words. "I don't want to disrespect you." The room went quiet. The officer's composure finally cracked. A loud metallic clang echoed through the interrogation room as she grabbed the chair opposite Keanu and dragged it backward violently. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood towering over him, hands on her hips, chest rising and falling with irritated breaths. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "Enough of this polite act," she hissed. "You're not innocent. You're not calm. You're just pretending, and I see right through you." Keanu lifted his eyes slowly, meeting her glare without the slightest hint of fear. His calmness wasn't a performance, it was who he was, and that honesty only enraged her more. She slammed her hand onto the table again, closer this time, inches from his fingers. The vibration rattled the metal and echoed through the walls. "Look at me when I speak," she snapped. He did, but his gaze was gentle, not defiant. That gentle look, that quiet patience, felt like a challenge to her authority. She leaned forward, her face so close to his that their breaths almost met. Her eyes burned with hostility, frustration, and something more, something personal. "You think you're better than everyone because people worship you," she spat. "You think your movies, your fame, your money make you untouchable." Keanu shook his head softly. "No, I don't think that at all." "Liar!" she exploded. Her voice boomed off the concrete walls. She stepped back, threw her hands up, and let out a bitter laugh mixed with disbelief. "You're a joke," she said with venom. "A weak, overrated man who hides behind niceness." She stepped forward again, fingers stabbing the air toward his chest. "You know what I think?" she hissed. "I think you're a pathetic, broke, stupid, clueless man who pretends to be humble. Because that's the only thing people like about you." Her voice dripped with insults, each designed to cut deeper than the last. Keanu didn't move, didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply blinked, his expression softening, not from hurt, but from sadness. Sadness that someone could carry so much anger, so much bitterness, and direct it at a stranger who had done nothing. She noticed that softness. It made her even angrier. "Don't look at me like you pity me," she shouted. "You're nothing in this room. Nothing! Do you hear me?" Keanu took a slow breath, the kind of breath someone takes to hold themselves steady against a storm. "I hear you," he said quietly. "But I don't believe those things about myself. And I don't believe you truly do either." For a moment, a split second, her face faltered. His calm truth hit her harder than any argument. But she immediately masked the crack with furio. "You're going to believe them by the time I'm done with you," she threatened. "I'll make sure of it." She stepped back, arms crossed. Eyes locked on him like a hunter preparing its next strike. Keanu remained still, composed, strong, even while insult after insult was thrown at him. The room had become a battlefield, not of fists, but of words, tension, and raw emotion. The officer's insults still hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking, but Keanu remained grounded. His breathing was steady, his heartbeat calm. He had faced chaos before, but this was different. This was personal, targeted, almost rehearsed, yet he refused to break. The officer paced in front of him like a storm rolling back and forth, each step harder than the last. She wanted him angry. She wanted him broken. She wanted to see him crack. But all she saw was quiet strength. Keanu sat upright, his back straight but not rigid, hands gently folded together. His expression was neutral, not cold, not wounded, just steady. A man choosing dignity in the face of humiliation, and that terrified her. She stopped suddenly and stared at him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Why aren't you fighting back?" she demanded. "Why aren't you yelling? Defending yourself? Calling me names? Anything?" Keanu lifted his eyes, soft and honest. "Because that won't help either of us." Her jaw tightened. "Don't pretend you care about helping me," she spat. "I don't need to pretend," he replied. That answer hit her harder than any insult could. For a moment, her expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, maybe even vulnerability, but she instantly buried it under anger. "You think you're some holy man?" she barked. "You think staying calm makes you strong?" Keanu shook his head lightly. "Strength isn't about anger. It's about control." His voice was low, soothing, almost gentle, the kind of voice that disarms even the most aggressive person. She hated it. She moved closer, leaning down until she was eye to eye with him, trying to find a crack in his armor. "There must be something that scares you," she said, almost whispering. "Something that makes you break." "Everyone has a breaking point." Keanu met her stare with quiet honesty. "I'm human," he said softly. "Of course I have fears. But this? Your words? This room? This isn't going to break me." Her nostrils flared. "You're too sure of yourself," she muttered bitterly. "No," he replied. "I'm sure of who I am." That line made her freeze. She stood up straight, as if physically struck. Keanu continued, his voice still calm. "I know my flaws. I know my past. But I also know my values. You can insult me, test me, yell at me, but that won't take away who I am." Silence filled the room. The officer's fists clenched at her sides. Not because Keanu had defied her, but because he hadn't. His lack of aggression, his refusal to collapse, his quiet strength. It revealed something she never intended to show. Her behavior was no longer professional. It was personal, emotional, driven by something deeper. Keanu could sense it now, like a shift in the atmosphere. "Officer," he said gently, "if something is wrong, you can tell me." Her eyes widened, furious, startled, exposed. Keanu's calm demeanor seemed to unsettle the officer even more. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her arms crossed tightly, pacing again like a caged animal. The room's fluorescent light flickered, and the small red camera in the corner recorded every tense second. Every word she had thrown at him, every insult, now felt like a mask, one that was starting to slip. As Keanu studied her, he noticed something subtle, a flicker in her eyes when a younger officer entered the room, whispering nervously. Her expression instantly tightened, and she shot him a sharp glance that made the air between them thicken. Keanu's curiosity grew. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just hostility from an officer. This was personal, orchestrated and intentional. He had a quiet suspicion that she had been instructed to provoke him. The younger officer, clearly uncomfortable, shifted from foot to foot. Finally, unable to contain himself, he blurted out, Officer, maybe you should, explain everything to Captain first?" The older officer's face hardened immediately, eyes flashing. She snapped, "What are you saying?" I mean, it's about the statement Mr. Reeves was asked to give. There's more to this than just routine questioning," the young officer stammered. Keanu's gaze sharpened. He didn't speak but listened intently. His intuition had been right. This wasn't random. Someone had called him in with an agenda. Someone was trying to set him up. The black lady officer's shoulders stiffened. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Keanu realized that her aggression wasn't about him personally. It was about her role in a larger scheme, a plan designed to humiliate him, intimidate him, and possibly frame him for something he didn't do. He stayed quiet, letting the truth reveal itself. He didn't need to argue. His calm presence forced the tension in the room to boil over in unexpected ways. The young officer, still shaking, whispered under his breath, "They're trying to pin a crime on him. It's not real. It's a setup." The older officer turned sharply toward him, her eyes blazing with fury and panic. For the first time, her confident mask faltered. Keanu leaned back slightly in his chair. His calm eyes scanned both of them. The truth was no longer hidden. He could sense it, like a faint light cutting through darkness. This was bigger than verbal insults, bigger than hostility. Someone wanted to manipulate the law, twist the narrative, and use this officer as a weapon. And now he was beginning to see it. For the first time, the officer seemed unsure. The carefully constructed facade of authority and intimidation was cracking. She had underestimated him, underestimated his ability to read the situation, to sense the hidden motives. Behind the anger, Keanu's patience and quiet. Observation had given him an edge. He didn't need to raise his voice or argue. The tension, the pacing, the fury. It was all unraveling on its own. The silence in the interrogation room was almost deafening. The black lady officer, once radiating unshakable authority, now seemed tense, unsure. Keanu's calm demeanor had shifted the balance, revealing cracks in her armor that no yelling or intimidation could hide. The younger officer, still visibly nervous, finally stepped closer to the table. His voice was low, almost trembling. "Sir, I think you should know, this isn't just a routine call. You were being set up." Keanu's eyes narrowed slightly, still composed, but now focused. "Set up?" he asked softly. "Yes," the young officer continued, glancing nervously at his superior. "Someone higher up wants to frame you for something you didn't do. They planned this interrogation to intimidate you, maybe even make you slip and say something that could be used against you." The black lady officer stiffened, her jaw tightening. She had expected secrecy, but the young officer's words were a leak she hadn't anticipated. Keanu stayed quiet, processing every detail. He had walked into the station expecting routine questions, perhaps some confusion or minor hassle. But this was deliberate, strategic, dangerous. "Why would anyone do this?" he asked calmly, his tone even, not accusatory, just seeking understanding. The young officer swallowed hard. "I don't know exactly politics, personal grudge, but it's serious. If the right people see you respond incorrectly, it could ruin everything for you. You were brought here to react the wrong way." The black lady officer's glare was now mixed with panic. Keanu could sense her internal struggle. Her controlled anger had been a performance, designed to provoke him. Now exposed, she was forced to confront the truth. Her actions were no longer entirely under control. Keanu leaned back in his chair, calm and collected. Yet his presence carried quiet authority. "Thank you for telling me," he said to the young officer. "You did the right thing." The young officer nodded quickly, relief washing over his features. The black lady officer stepped back, visibly shaken. Her usual confidence had crumbled under the weight of the revelation. She had underestimated Keanu, underestimated his ability to observe, to remain calm, and to sense the hidden motives behind hostility. For the first time in this tense encounter, the room was no longer just a battlefield of anger and intimidation. It had shifted. The truth was surfacing, and Keanu now had the advantage. You have no idea what you're getting into," she hissed, trying to regain control, but her voice lacked the earlier authority. Keanu looked at her quietly, his calm eyes steady. "I understand more than you think," he replied softly. Not with anger, but with certainty. In that moment, it became clear. The confrontation had moved from a personal attack to a revelation of a deeper plot, one that Keanu now understood and could navigate with patience and dignity. The door to the interrogation room swung open abruptly, and the police captain strode in, eyes scanning the tense scene. His footsteps echoed heavily on the linoleum floor, commanding instant attention. The black lady officer snapped to attention, trying to regain her authoritative composure, but there was a subtle tremor in her movements, a crack in the facade that Keanu had quietly observed. "Report!" the captain demanded, his voice firm, leaving no room for hesitation. The young officer, still shaking but determined, stepped forward. "Sir, this interrogation—" It wasn't standard. Mr. Reeves was brought in under false pretenses. Someone higher up is trying to set him up, and he swallowed hard. "The lead officer here has been aggressive and intentionally provocative." The captain's eyes narrowed sharply. "Is that true?" he asked, turning to the black lady officer. For the first time, she faltered. Her carefully rehearsed words escaped her control. She opened her mouth, then closed it, blinking rapidly. Her anger and composure wavered, and it was obvious she had been caught off guard. Keanu, still seated, remained calm, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The energy in the room had changed. The power that had seemed entirely in her hands was now slipping away. "Explain yourself," the captain ordered. The officer's face tightened. Her voice was clipped, defensive. "I was following orders. You were following orders to intimidate a man for reasons you couldn't even explain?" The captain cut in sharply. "That is not how we conduct an interrogation. That is not how we uphold justice." Keanu remained silent, letting the truth speak for itself. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with her flustered state, amplifying the impact of every word spoken. The young officer added, "Sir, Mr. Reeves has cooperated fully. He has remained professional, calm, and respectful, even under extreme verbal assault. It's clear he has done nothing wrong, and any attempt to trap him has failed." The captain's gaze returned to the black lady officer, now tinged with both disappointment and authority. "You will provide a full report on your actions, and this incident will be reviewed immediately. Your behavior was unprofessional, and your motives will be investigated." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her mouth again, but no words could undo the exposure of her actions. The truth had surfaced, and the consequences were beginning to fall on her. Not Keanu. Keanu finally stood, his posture calm and composed. The captain acknowledged him with a nod, signaling the end of the interrogation as he walked toward the exit reporters and officers. Outside could already sense the story. The man who had been disrespected, provoked, and falsely targeted had maintained his dignity throughout. The tables had turned completely. The officer's aggression and deceit had been exposed, and Keanu Reeves, calm, polite, and observant, now held the moral high ground. The heavy metal doors of the New York police station swung open, and Keanu Reeves stepped into the cold December air. Rain had begun to fall lightly, turning the streets into a mirror of flickering city lights. Sirens from distant patrol cars created a faint rhythm, as if the city itself was celebrating the moment. Reporters had gathered outside, cameras flashing, microphones poised, hungry for a story, but Keanu remained calm, composed, and dignified, his presence commanding attention without a single word. Behind him, the black lady officer watched from the doorway, her expression a complex mix of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief. Her carefully constructed image of authority had crumbled entirely. Orders had been exposed, schemes uncovered, and her attempt to intimidate and humiliate Keanu had utterly failed. Keanu walked steadily, his long coat brushing against his legs. Each step was deliberate, controlled, and graceful, projecting quiet strength. He had been tested, disrespected, and provoked, yet he emerged unscathed, morally, emotionally, and reputationally. The young officer who had revealed the hidden truth watched from inside the station, relief evident in his posture. Keanu's patience and integrity had set the tone, and justice had begun to prevail, not through shouting, confrontation, or retaliation, but through calm observation, strategic patience, and unwavering dignity. A reporter shouted a question. "Mr. Reeves, how do you respond to the allegations?" Keanu paused for a brief moment, giving a small, respectful nod. "I came here to cooperate," he said softly, "and the truth always finds a way." The cameras clicked, capturing the moment in high detail. Keanu's expression remained composed, serene, and confident, embodying the quiet strength that had carried him through the tense hours inside. As he walked further down the steps, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement, the reality of the situation began to settle. He had not only preserved his own dignity, but he had also exposed the corruption, deceit, and personal vendettas that had been used to try to manipulate him. Behind him, the officer faced disciplinary action. Her attempts to control, humiliate, and intimidate had failed spectacularly. In the end, Keanu Reeves had remained a symbol of calm authority, moral integrity, and resilience, a reminder that true power lies not in aggression, but in control, observation, and the courage to remain oneself in the face of hostility. The rain began to fall harder, but Keanu didn't hurry. He paused for a moment, looked up at the gray sky, and took a slow, deliberate breath. The city, in all its chaotic brilliance, seemed to acknowledge him. He had walked through fire, through insult and false accusation, and he emerged victorious, with dignity intact, unbroken, and stronger than before. The story would spread. The lesson was clear: respect, patience, and quiet strength can conquer hostility and reveal the truth.